with American weakness. That's where we start this hour of the program. It's becoming an all too common occurrence, especially after the strong America First policies that President Donald Trump implemented while he was in office. Candidate Joe Biden told the world that he would be reversing all of that if he were just to be elected, that America would slowly recede into the background of nations and let others take over. Well, wouldn't you know it? It's what's happening, but much faster than we ever expected. Russia decided to invade Ukraine with this president in office, not the last one. Now, do you think that was a coincidence? And with all the talk of Trump being hard on NATO, you'd think Russia's Putin would have chosen then to make his strike when NATO was apparently at its weakest. So is Putin just a fool to wait, or did he happen to know that President Trump was actually making NATO stronger by forcing member nations to keep up with their end of the deal and spend more of their own money for defense? The entire Western world, Europe included, has relied on America to keep the peace, lead the way, and in the case of Europe, even help fund their decadent lifestyles, which the American taxpayers directly subsidize due to our military defending of that continent. We've done it since 1945, and now paying higher prices for medication because Europe's enacted price controls and a whole host of other things that interfere with us. They don't care. During World War II, America sent its sons and daughters there to die, to save the European continent from the Nazi threat. And after that was all done, we poured our own treasure back into Europe to rebuild through the Marshall Plan. The same parents who sent their kids to die now had to pay out of their own pockets to rebuild that broken continent. And we still pay for it today. But all we get for putting ourselves in harm's way and in massive debt that we'll never get paid back for, by the way, is derision and scorn, even after defeating the Soviet Union without firing a shot. And that's why America First is so popular here at home. It's not about leaving our position on the world stage. It is about helping ourselves get back on our feet for once and look out for our citizens here. But the Democrats, the Biden administration, would rather the world bleed this country dry, and the rest of the world knows it. Heck, even average world citizens know it. Take the migrant caravan that's heading north right now. A Haitian migrant from that caravan was quoted as saying this: he, Biden, promised the Haitian community he will help them. He'll recall Title 42. He will help us have real asylum. Now we need him to keep his promise. Or what? America doesn't owe this guy or that country or its citizens anything. Sure, you can come here, but do it respectfully. Come legally, respect our laws in doing so, because it's you who owe this country something. For giving you a place, a chance, a lifeline for a better life, that shining city on a hill. That's what you should be thanking us for. We don't owe you anything. But it's gotten to the point that the world expects America to provide for it all the time. And that's because of weak, feckless leaders like Socialist President Joe Biden. And that's not even the worst of it, because the Biden administration lets the world take advantage of us all the time without taking any responsibility for anything at all, ever. Remember when presidents had to take the blame for mistakes? They were expected to. They would be accountable. In fact, here's President Harry Truman on his famous "The Buck Stops Here" plaque that sat right on top of his desk.
Well, nobody else could make the decision but me, because I was the president, and the final decision comes to the president, you know. I used to have a sign on my desk that said, "The buck stops here." The buck stops at the president's desk when he's president of the United States, and he either makes the decisions or he lets them go by default, and you can't afford to do that when you're president.
Oh, you just can't let things slide by? You mean you can't just stroll down the beach in Delaware while Americans can't afford to fill their cars with gas? I'm just digressing. But contrast that to Joe Biden's administration. On the energy crisis, here's their response.
Given the fact that they keep hitting new highs, are there new initiatives, new policy proposals that your team is working through right now that could possibly have an effect that you could roll out in the weeks ahead if prices continue where they've been?
So everything's on the table, as you heard us say the last couple of weeks. But I do want to say, if you look at what happened when Putin started amassing troops on the border with Russia, the price of gas has increased by $1.51.
Yeah. It's all because of Russia. Vladimir Putin. Not us. We're victims. They're still rolling with that line, by the way, even though nobody's buying it. Nobody, not even Democrats, buy that. No thinking person buys into that. And to make it seem like they were doing something without doing anything at all, well, now the president invoked the Defense Production Act, which is only rolled out in the middle of national emergencies. And what did they declare this emergency over? To build more solar panels. Yeah, solar panels. The only problem is his own administration can't even explain why. Listen to this.
On the Defense Production Act that was announced today, the president, taking a step back from that, what emergency is the president using to invoke the Defense Production Act? Because historically it's been in the 1950s for the Korean War, and during COVID it was enacted. What emergency is it, or what's the real emergency in the solar industry for the Defense Production Act?
So let me, I was going to say first, the president, when he takes the Defense Production Act, it's to make sure that he's delivering for the American people. It is an important tool that he has used a couple of times, and it has been incredibly effective. So for this particular Clean Energy Defense Production Act, he is invoking the Defense Production Act to rapidly expand domestic production of solar panel parts, building insulation, heat pumps, and more. He is putting the full force of the federal government's purchasing power behind supporting American clean energy manufacturers.
The question still remains unanswered. The question was, what's the emergency that the Defense Production Act would be invoked for solar panels? By the way, you know who benefits from that? The Chinese. Slave labor, child labor, the Chinese benefit from that. Nice work, everybody. The Chinese Communist Party racking up more wins against the Biden administration. Now, wouldn't it be nice if Democrats and Feckless Joe and his team fought as hard for this country as they do to tear it apart? Because apparently some in the January 6th committee now want to do away with the Constitution altogether. This incredibly partisan political circus wants to do away with the Constitution because they're thinking about trying to end the Electoral College, among other things. I guess it's a, wait for it, it's a threat to our democracy. Of course it is.
And the new reporting is that a number of Democrats on the committee want to use the committee to push a pre-existing agenda for voting rights. They want to help push pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis voting bill. And some even want to use it as a pretext to advocate eliminating the Electoral College. So we're beginning to see perhaps some of the larger purposes behind the January 6th committee.
Now, this is who Republicans, Liz Cheney, and Adam Kinzinger aligned themselves with. Shouldn't be surprised either. Here's another member of that committee, a Democrat, Jamie Raskin, bragging about getting rid of the Electoral College. Listen in.
I mean, my very first bill I introduced as a state senator in Maryland was for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So again, I speak only for myself here, and totally apart from all of this, I've taken a position that the Electoral College is an undemocratic relic of the early Constitution.
Right. And if we get rid of the Electoral College, we'll never have to hear from those people in red states ever again. Democrats fight back against America much harder than they ever fight for it. That's a fact. And we'd better step up and start fighting for our own country right now and get ourselves together, because if we don't start making America our #1 priority, there won't be anybody left to look after the world later. They should take note of that, and so should you. Who's with me?